Story 1. The Stroke of 12. The loudest night of the year is the safest night to kill someone. Nobody hears the glass breaking when the sky is screaming. I learned that the hard way. My parents were at a block party. I was 14, alone in the house, sitting in the living room with the lights off. I liked watching the flashes against the snow in the backyard. It was 11:50 p.m. The neighbors were going crazy with the mortars. Boom. The floor shook. Boom. The windows rattled in their frames. I stood up to get a glass of water. I walked into the kitchen, which had a sliding glass door facing the backyard. The yard was pitch black, buried in 2 feet of snow. The fireworks were the only light source. They turned the world into a strobe light. Flash. A blast of red light lit up the snow. The yard was empty. Darkness. Flash. Green light. A figure was standing in the middle of the yard. Darkness. My heart stopped. I pressed my face against the cold glass, waiting for the next explosion. Maybe it was a tree shadow. Maybe it was a decoration. Flash. White light. He was 10 feet closer. It wasn't a shadow. It was a man in a gray winter coat. He wasn't moving. He was posed like a mannequin, staring right at the house. Darkness. I didn't scream. I reached for the lock on the sliding door. My fingers fumbled with the latch. It was already locked. Thank God. Flash. He was gone. The yard was empty again. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He must have run away. Then, a massive finale firework went off above the house. A deafening crack boom that shook the foundation. At the exact same second, the kitchen window next to my head exploded. He didn't run away. He had moved to the side. He threw a brick through the glass, perfectly timed with the explosion. The firework masked the sound. If I hadn't felt the shards of glass hit my cheek, I wouldn't have known he was inside. I sprinted. I didn't look back. I ran down the hallway and dove under my bed, sliding all the way to the wall. I pulled a pile of dirty laundry in front of the gap. I lay there, shivering, listening. The house was silent until I heard it. Crunch, crunch, boots on broken glass. He was in the kitchen. He wasn't rushing. He was walking with a heavy, calm rhythm. He walked down the hall. He stopped at the guest room. I heard a door creak open, then close. He was checking every room. The TV in the living room was still on. The volume spiked as the host started the final countdown. We are 60 seconds away from the new year. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I saw the shadow of his boots under the gap. He stood there for a long time. 30 seconds. My bladder felt like it was going to burst. I clamped my hand over my mouth, tears leaking into my palm. The door handle slowly turned. Click. I had forgotten to lock the bedroom door. 10, 9. The door creaked open. The hallway lights spilled onto the carpet. 8, 7. He walked into the room. I could see his boots 2 feet from my face. They were caked in snow and mud. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year, the TV screamed. The man didn't look under the bed. He didn't tear the room apart. He walked to the wall where my calendar hung. I heard the sound of a thick marker squeaking on paper. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Then, he dropped something on the floor. He turned around and walked out. I heard the front door open and close. I stayed under that bed until sunrise. When my parents finally came home, they found me catatonic, covered in dust bunnies. The police swept the house. They found the broken window and the wet footprints. But they never found the man. But they found what he left. The object he dropped on the floor was a roll of red duct tape. And on my wall calendar, he hadn't crossed out a day. He had circled January 1st in thick red marker. And right below it, he wrote 2 words. Day 1. I'm 25 now. I live in a high-rise apartment with 24-hour security. I don't celebrate holidays. But every year on January 1st, I find a roll of red duct tape sitting outside my front door. He's not finished. He's just counting the years. Story 2. The rideshare. I welded my trunk shut after that night. I don't care about the resale value. I just need to know that nothing can ever get in there again. It was New Year's Eve, 11:42 p.m. I was 1 ride away from a bonus. The ping came from a dead-end service road down by the reservoir. I should have ignored it. The profile had no name, just a default gray icon. But greed is a powerful thing, so I drove into the dark. When I pulled up, there was no house. There was just the black, oily water of the reservoir and a single flickering streetlight. She was standing directly under it. She wore a silver sequin party dress and a tiara that said 2025. She was shivering violently. She opened the back door and slid in before I could even put the car in park. I turned around to ask for her destination, but the words died in my throat. She was soaking wet. It hadn't rained in 3 days, but she looked like she had just climbed out of a swimming pool. Her hair was plastered to her skull. Gray water dripped from her nose onto my upholstery. "Rough night?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the back of my head. Her eyes were bloodshot and wide, like an animal caught in a trap. She pointed a pale, wet finger at the windshield. "Drive?" she whispered. It sounded like she was gargling water. I started driving. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like rain or chlorine. It smelled like stagnant mud and rotting leaves. It was the smell of something that had been underwater for a long time. I glanced in the rearview mirror. A puddle of black water was forming on the leather seat beneath her. We passed under a streetlight. In the flash of light, I saw her reflection. She wasn't blinking. We hit a stretch of darkness. We passed the next streetlight. I checked the mirror again. She had moved. She wasn't behind the passenger seat anymore. She was in the middle, leaning forward, her face inches from the plastic divider mesh. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. I looked at the road. My headlights caught movement in the ditch to my left. Something was running alongside the car. It wasn't a dog. It was pale, hairless, and moving on all fours. Its limbs were too long. Its spine twisted upward like a broken insect. I was doing 40 miles per hour, and this thing was matching my speed effortlessly. I slammed on the gas. The woman in the back started thrashing. She slammed her wet hands against the window. She wasn't haunting me. She was using my car as a shield. The thing in the ditch lunged. It didn't hit the metal. It latched onto the roof with a heavy thud. I heard claws tearing through metal. The roof buckled above my head. The woman in the back screamed, a sound that was more water than air. I took the corner onto the highway too fast. The tires slipped on black ice. The world spun sideways. I saw trees, then the guardrail, then darkness. The airbag exploded in my face, and I blacked out. I woke up to a flashlight in my eyes. A police officer was knocking on my shattered window. "Sir, can you hear me?" I scrambled out, coughing smoke. My first thought was the passenger. I pointed to the back seat. "The girl. Get the girl out." The cop shined his light into the back. It was empty. I shoved past him to look. The seat was empty, but the floor mats were flooded with gallons of muddy lake water. The officer told me I had spun out on ice. He said I was alone. He said the stress of the crash made me hallucinate the passenger. I almost believed him, until I went to the scrapyard the next day to get my phone out of the wreck. The back seat was dry. The water had evaporated. But on the driver's side headrest, right behind where my neck had been, there were 3 deep parallel slash marks. They had cut through the leather and into the foam. The passenger didn't leave them. The thing on the roof did. I don't drive at night anymore, because sometimes, when it rains, I hear wet footsteps running behind my car. And I know it's just checking to see if I've unlocked the doors.
Story 3: The Midnight Toast. The doctors say I was born with a birth defect. They say I never had lips, that my skin has always been smooth from nose to chin. But they are lying. I remember having a mouth before I met Julian. Julian invited me to his family estate for New Year's Eve. He said they were traditional. He didn't tell me their traditions involved blood. We arrived at 11:30 p.m. The house was deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. The driveway was lined with torches that smelled like burning hair. Inside, the heat was suffocating. There were 30 people in the ballroom. They wore expensive tuxedos and gowns, but their skin looked waxy and pale. When we walked in, the music stopped. They didn't smile. They just stared at me like I was a meal. "Just relax," Julian whispered. He squeezed my hand too hard. At 11:50 p.m., the waiters came out. They weren't carrying champagne. They were carrying silver trays piled high with porcelain masks. The masks were beautiful, painted with gold leaf. But there was something wrong with them. They had eye holes, but no opening for the mouth. Just smooth, white porcelain where the lips should be. "Put it on," Julian's father said. His eyes looked like broken glass. "We must face the new year pure. Without speech. Without sin." I hesitated. Julian grabbed the mask and shoved it into my hands. "Do it, Sarah. Don't embarrass me." I put the mask on. It was cold and heavy. The moment it touched my face, the ribbon tied itself behind my head. I tried to adjust it, but it was tight. It felt like it was shrinking. 5 minutes to midnight, the father announced. The waiters returned. This time, they held crystal goblets filled with a thick, black liquid. It moved like syrup. The guests took the glasses, but they couldn't drink. Their masks had no mouths. They just held the black sludge, staring at me. Then I realized I was the only one not holding a glass. 3 minutes. My face started to itch. I reached up to scratch under the mask, but I couldn't get my finger underneath the edge. The porcelain wasn't sitting on my skin anymore. It was fusing to it. I tried to call Julian's name, but my voice was muffled. My lips were being pressed together by the shrinking mask. 2 minutes. The guests formed a circle around me. Julian stepped away and joined them. He put on his own mask. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw regret in his eyes. Then it was gone. 1 minute. They didn't count down numbers. They started chanting. The vessel. The vessel. The vessel. The father stepped forward. He wasn't holding a glass. He was holding a silver hammer. To break the old year, he whispered, raising the hammer, "We must crack the vessel." He was looking at my forehead. Panic took over. I couldn't scream. The mask was squeezing my skull so hard my vision blurred. As the father swung the hammer, I grabbed a sharp metal fondue fork from the table. I jammed it into Julian's neck. He dropped. The circle broke. I ran. I bolted through the heavy oak doors, into the snow, blindly tearing through the woods. I could hear them behind me. They weren't running. They were laughing. And their laughter sounded like glass breaking. I collapsed on the highway 3 miles away. A trucker found me and called the police. I woke up in the hospital the next morning. The police told me they raided the house. It was empty. The furniture, the guests, the food, all gone. They said it looked like nobody had lived there for years. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked in the mirror and screamed. But no sound came out. The mask was gone. But it had taken my face with it. Where my mouth used to be, the skin is now smooth, pale, and scarless. I have no lips. I have no opening. I have to be fed through a tube in my nose. Julian's family didn't want to kill me. They just wanted to make sure I could never tell anyone what I saw. And now, every time I look in the mirror, I see the new year staring back at me.
Story 4. The Naughty List. My dad didn't want to catch Santa Claus. He wanted to kill him. It was Christmas Eve. I was 7 years old, hiding behind the sofa. My dad was sitting in his armchair, facing the fireplace. He had a shotgun resting across his lap, and a bottle of whiskey on the floor. He told me he was going to blow the trespasser's head off. He said nobody breaks into his house, not even a saint. I watched him stare at the fire for hours. At 3 a.m., the flames died down to glowing red embers. The room went cold. Then I heard it. It wasn't sleigh bells. It wasn't hooves on the roof. It was a wet, sliding sound coming from inside the chimney. It sounded like raw meat being squeezed through a tight rubber pipe. My dad sat up. He pumped the shotgun. "Who's there?" he shouted. A black object dropped from the flue and landed in the ashes with a heavy thud. It wasn't a toy. It was a scroll. But it wasn't made of paper. It was yellow, cracked, and smelled like old leather. My dad stood up, keeping the gun leveled at the dark opening of the fireplace. He kicked the scroll open with his boot. He squinted at the writing. His face went pale. The anger drained out of him, replaced by pure confusion. "Miller. Adultery," he whispered, reading the list. "Johnson. Theft." He looked closer. "These aren't kids. These are adults. These are crimes." Then he froze. He read the last name at the bottom of the list. David. Rath. That was my dad's name. The embers in the fireplace instantly went out. The room plunged into pitch darkness. "Dad," I whispered. A hand shot out of the cold fireplace. It was huge. It was covered in soot and thick, gray fur. The fingers had too many knuckles. It grabbed my dad by the ankle. He screamed. He pulled the trigger. The muzzle flash lit up the room for a split second. In that flash, I saw it. It wasn't a jolly man in a red suit. It was a horned shadow, crammed into the fireplace, its mouth open wide enough to swallow a head. My dad was yanked off his feet. He clawed at the rug, his fingernails tearing through the fabric. "Help me," he screamed. He was dragged toward the fireplace. But a grown man doesn't fit up a standard chimney. That didn't stop it. I heard a sickening crack. It was the sound of his collarbone snapping. Then another crack, his ribs collapsing. He was being folded like a piece of paper. He was pulled up into the darkness, screaming until his voice turned into a wet gurgle and faded away up the flue. Then, silence. I passed out behind the couch. I woke up on Christmas morning to bright sunlight. The living room was clean. The shotgun was gone. The fireplace was swept. There was only one present under the tree. It was a large, heavy box wrapped in red paper. The tag read, "From Dad." My hands were shaking as I tore the paper. I opened the lid. The box was filled to the brim with black lumps. Coal. But it wasn't cold rock. The lumps were warm. They felt soft, almost like organic matter that had been burned and compressed. I dug through the pile. At the bottom, I found something that made me vomit. It was my dad's gold wedding ring. It was still stuck on a finger that had been charred into pure charcoal. We don't get coal when we're naughty. We get the remains of the people who were. Story 5. The 11:59 loop. I have died 46 times tonight. Sometimes it is a knife in the throat. Sometimes it is a snap of the neck. Sometimes he just crushes my skull against the wall. But every time my heart stops, the ball on the TV drops, the crowd screams Happy New Year, and I wake up back on my couch. The time on the cable box is always 11:58 p.m. It always starts the same. I am alone in my apartment. The TV hosts are hyping up the crowd in Times Square. 10 seconds. My hands start shaking. I know he is coming. 9, 8. I stare at my front door. It is triple locked. It doesn't matter. 3, 2. At 1, the door doesn't open. It disintegrates. It explodes inward in a shower of wood and metal. A figure steps through the dust. He is tall, wearing a black trench coat. He has no face. Where his features should be, there is just gray static, like a TV channel tuned to a dead station. In run 30, I barricaded the door with the sofa. He walked through the wall. In run 38, I sprinted to the fire escape. He was waiting on the balcony. He threw me off the 8th floor. In run 42, I grabbed a kitchen knife. I lunged at him. He caught the blade with his bare hand. He didn't bleed. He just tilted his head, the static buzzing louder, and shoved the handle down my throat. He doesn't run. He moves like a computer program executing a command. He knows my moves before I make them. Run 47. I was tired. My soul felt bruised. I couldn't run anymore. I woke up on the couch. 11:58 p.m. I didn't barricade the door. I didn't grab a weapon. I poured 2 glasses of champagne. I sat on the floor, facing the door, and waited. 3, 2, 1. Boom. The door shattered. The static man stepped in. He raised his hand to strike, his fingers forming a claw. Then he stopped. He saw me sitting there, holding the glass out to him. The static on his face swirled aggressively, changing from gray to angry red. "Why aren't you running?" His voice didn't sound human. It sounded like grinding metal and dial-up internet tones. "I'm tired," I said. "Just tell me why." The figure lowered his hand. The static slowed down. "You are a glitch," he buzzed. "You died in a car accident 3 hours ago on the way to the liquor store. But your consciousness refused to disconnect. You are clogging the server." I felt cold. I remembered the ice on the road. I remembered the headlights. I didn't remember getting home. "I am not a killer," the entity said, stepping closer. "I am the deletion protocol. You have to go. The new year cannot start with an error code." He reached out a hand. It wasn't violent this time. It was an offer. "Let go," he whispered. I looked at the champagne. I looked at the static void of his face. I closed my eyes and nodded. He touched my forehead. The world dissolved into white noise. The sound was deafening. Then, silence. I gasped, shooting up from the couch. My chest was heaving. I checked my body. No pain. No blood. I looked at the window. Bright, blinding sunlight streamed in. I checked my phone. January 1st, 10 a.m. I started laughing. I did it. I beat the protocol. I survived. I stood up, feeling lighter than air. Mom, Dad, I called out. I knew they were coming over for brunch. I walked into the kitchen. My mom was sitting at the table. My dad was standing by the window. They were both crying. "Hey," I said, walking toward them. "What's wrong?" "Happy New Year." My mom didn't look up. She was holding a tissue to her face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom." I reached out to touch her shoulder. My hand went through her shoulder. I didn't feel warmth. I felt nothing. My hand passed through her body like she was made of mist. My dad turned to my mom. "The police said he died instantly on impact. At least he didn't suffer." I froze. I tried to scream. "I'm right here. I'm right here." No sound came out. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was ticking, but my reflection wasn't in the oven glass. The loop didn't restart. It didn't save me. It just left me behind. I didn't survive the new year. I just missed the exit. And now, I have to watch them mourn me forever.
My daughter thinks the naughty list is a fairy tale. She thinks it's about coal. She doesn't know the truth. The list isn't a warning, it's a menu. And when I was 10, I was the main course. "I hate you," she screeches. "I wish you were dead. I wish you'd just disappear." Elias stood still and didn't yell back. He crosses the room. He moves too fast. He grabs Maya's wrist. "Ow, Dad!" He drags her to the fireplace. He yanks up his sleeve. "Look at it," he whispers. Maya stops fighting. She stares at the pulsing scar. "You want me to disappear?" Elias asks. His eyes are wide, staring at the soot in the chimney. "Let me tell you about the night I almost did." Young Elias wasn't a brat. He was something worse. He stood in the kitchen holding a bottle of bleach over the family dog's water bowl. The golden retriever wagged its tail, trusting him. Elias didn't look angry. He looked bored. He tilted the bottle. Thick, clear poison swirled into the water. He didn't hate the dog. He was just curious. He wanted to see what dying looked like. "Here, boy," Elias whispered. He smiled. Click. The lights died. No flicker, no dimming. The house just plunged into a heavy, suffocating black. Elias froze. The dog whined and backed away, tail tucked. Animals always know first. Elias stood in the dark kitchen. Then the sound started. It came from the roof. It sounded like heavy, wet iron being dragged across the shingles. Clank. Shit. Elias looked up at the ceiling. The air in the kitchen dropped 30 degrees in a second. His breath puffed out in white clouds. Boom. He heard a knock at the front door. It shook the walls. Boom. It wasn't a knuckle, it was a battering ram. Elias crept into the hallway. The smell hit him first. It didn't smell like sulfur or fire. It smelled like a freezer full of old meat. It smelled like wet iron and dried blood. "Dad?" Elias whispered. The front door groaned. The wood screamed as it began to bend inward. Something massive was pushing from the other side. Crack. The door frame snapped. The heavy oak door fell forward with a dead thud. The blizzard outside was gray and thick. But the thing standing in the doorway was darker. It was 7 feet of matted wet fur. Chains were hooked directly into its flesh, dragging on the floor. It stepped inside, it lifted its head, it had no eyes, just empty wet sockets that wept black tar down its snout. It opened its mouth, rows of needle teeth. "Elias." The voice sounded like grinding stones. Elias didn't scream, his brain short-circuited. He turned and scrambled up the stairs on his hands and knees. Elias hit the landing and sprinted for his room. Behind him, the heavy, wet footsteps started up the stairs. Clop, clop, clop. They were slow, mocking. It knew he had nowhere to go. Elias dove into his bedroom. He didn't lock the door. Locks don't stop monsters. He scrambled under his bed, curling into a tight ball against the wall, squeezing his eyes shut. Don't be real. Don't be real. The bedroom door creaked open. The smell of the slaughterhouse filled the room. Elias held his breath until his lungs burned. He saw the hooves enter his vision. They were covered in mud and filth. They stopped right beside the bed. Silence. Elias opened his eyes. Maybe it didn't know he was there. Crash. A massive hand punched straight through the mattress from above. It missed Elias's face by an inch. Dust and feathers exploded. The hand was huge, the fingers tipped with jagged black talons. It groped blindly, shredding the sheets, searching for meat. Elias shrieked. He scrambled out from the other side of the bed. The creature roared, a sound that shattered the window glass. It flipped the bed over with one hand like it was made of cardboard. Elias was cornered. The door was blocked by the beast. The window was a 2-story drop. He looked up. The attic hatch. The cord was dangling just above him. Elias grabbed his desk chair and threw it at the monster. The beast swatted it away mid-air, smashing it into splinters, but it gave Elias a second. He jumped. He grabbed the cord. He swung the ladder down and scrambled up into the darkness just as a claw swiped the air where his ankle had been. He slammed the hatch shut. He was safe. Then he smelled smoke. He looked down at the wooden hatch door. The wood wasn't holding, it was bubbling. The creature wasn't trying to break it down. It was burning through. The wood of the hatch didn't splinter. It melted. Like burning plastic. The trapdoor dripped away in thick, black globs. Elias scrambled backward, crab-walking over rolls of pink fiberglass insulation. The heat in the attic spiked. It was an oven. Krampus didn't climb up. He rose. He levitated through the hole on a column of sulfurous steam. In the small attic, he was impossible. Too big. His horns scraped the rafters, knocking dust onto Elias's face. He had to hunch over, his spine cracking audibly as he unfolded his limbs. He reached behind his back and unslung the basket. It wasn't woven reed. It was a cage made of human ribs and wet leather. It dripped a black, tar-like substance that hissed when it hit the floorboards. Inside the basket, the darkness churned. Elias heard sounds of thousands of tiny, weeping voices. "No," Elias whimpered, his back hitting the chimney brick. "No, please." Krampus lunged. The creature's hand, massive and covered in coarse hair, wrapped around Elias's left forearm. Elias's scream was raw. It wasn't a movie scream. It was the sound of an animal in a trap. Smoke rose from his arm. The smell of cooking meat filled the tight space instantly. Elias watched through tear-filled eyes as the creature's grip burned the hoof mark deep into his muscle permanently. Krampus lifted him off the ground effortlessly. He dangled Elias over the open basket. The void inside roared, a vacuum hungry for a new soul. Elias looked into the creature's face. No anger, no hate, just a job to do. "I'm sorry," Elias shrieked. "I'm sorry I'm bad." Krampus didn't blink. He lowered Elias closer to the black tar. The weeping voices from the basket got louder. They were calling him. "Join us, join us." Elias felt the cold suction of the basket grabbing his legs. He was going to die. He was going to hell in a basket made of bones. Desperation broke his brain. He didn't beg for forgiveness, he begged for a trade. "Take Mom!" Elias screamed, sobbing snot running down his face. "Don't take me, she's downstairs. Take her instead." Krampus paused. He tilted his head, savoring the selfishness. The absolute corruption. It was delicious, the creature's grip tightened. He prepared to drop the boy. Dong. A sound cut through the roar of the wind. It came from the valley below. the church tower. Dong! Krampus froze. His hand holding Elias by the scorched arm stopped in midair. Elias swung helplessly over the basket, sobbing. Dong! Through the hole in the roof where the storm had ripped away shingles, a single beam of gray light stabbed into the attic. It wasn't holy light, it was just the sun. The blizzard was breaking. Krampus looked at the light. Then he looked at Elias. The creature let out a hiss of pure frustration. He pulled Elias back from the basket and threw him onto the insulation. Elias scrambled back, clutching his burned arm, terrified. Krampus stood up to his full height. He looked at the beam of sunlight hitting the dust. The rules were the rules. The night was over. The monster looked down at Elias one last time. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He pointed a long, clawed finger at the fresh burn on Elias's arm. Marked, Krampus stepped backward, into the darkest corner of the attic. The shadows seemed to wrap around him, swallowing the fur and the horns. He didn't vanish in a puff of magic. He just faded, like a stain being scrubbed out. Elias was left alone in the cold, silent attic. The only sound was the distant church bell ringing for Christmas morning. Dong. He ran out of time, Elias whispered. That's the only reason I'm here. If I'd been higher on the list, if he'd come for me an hour earlier, I would be in the basket. The living room is dead silent. Maya stood frozen. The bratty, entitled teenager is gone. She looks at her dad. She sees the terror in a grown man's eyes. She looks down at the iPad in her hand. The screen glows with a game candy-colored brightness. Slowly, Maya walks to the fireplace. Maya? Elias asks, voice trembling. She doesn't answer. She tosses the iPad into the fire. Crunch. Plastic melts. The battery pops and hisses. The screen goes black as the flames consume it. Maya turns to her dad. She is pale. I'll set the table, she whispers. She walks to the kitchen. She doesn't stomp. She doesn't slam the door. She walks softly, carefully. Elias stays by the fire. He watches the snow falling outside the window. It looks beautiful. It looks white. Be good, Maya, he breathes, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. For God's sake, just be good. Outside in the darkness of the yard, the motion sensor light flickers on. There is nothing there, just the empty snow. But as the light dies, we hear it. Faint, far away, but unmistakable. It was the sound of a heavy chain dragging on a roof. Don't be like Maya. Do not be on the naughty list. Hit like and subscribe to keep your record clean, because you know exactly what happens to those who are on the list. And he is always watching.
I still have the cassette tape. The police gave it back to my dad after they closed the case. They labeled it non-evidence, but I know what it really is. It's a death threat. I haven't played it in 10 years. I don't need to. I have every second of that audio memorized. It's a recording from a voice-activated recorder we had in the tent that night. The first 30 minutes are just me and my best friend Sam, laughing, crinkling chip bags, talking about school. Normal stuff. But the last 10 minutes, it's just the sound of us sleeping. Deep, rhythmic breathing. And then, right at the end, you hear a zipper. You hear the tent zipper slowly sliding down. Zzzzt. And then you hear a voice. It's a whisper, right up against the microphone. It sounds wet. It sounds like someone trying to speak with a mouth full of water. It says, Leo is sleeping. Leo looks ripe. The timestamp on that recording is 3 a.m. I was fast asleep, which means whatever said that was inside the tent with me. This happened in the summer of 2012. I was 12 years old. Back then, the world felt safe. My backyard felt like a fortress. We lived in a quiet suburb in Ohio, the kind of place where people leave their garage doors open and kids ride bikes until the street lights come on. My backyard was huge. It backed up to a dense line of oak trees that separated our property from an old abandoned farm. My dad had put up a chain-link fence, but the woods were always there, looming over us. That weekend, my best friend Sam came over for a sleepover. "Let's camp out," Sam said. He had just gotten a new tent for his birthday. "We can set it up by the big oak tree." I was all for it. At 12, camping in the backyard is the ultimate adventure. You feel independent, wild, but you also know that if things get scary, the back door is only 50 feet away. We set up the tent around 6 p.m. We dragged out sleeping bags, pillows, a lantern, and enough junk food to kill a horse. My mom came out around sunset with a plate of warm cookies. "You boys be careful," she said, smiling. "If you get scared, just come inside. The sliding glass door is unlocked." "We won't get scared, Mom," I said. I was trying to look tough in front of Sam. She laughed, ruffled my hair, and went back inside. I watched the kitchen light turn on. It was a beacon, a yellow square of safety in the gathering dark. We spent the first few hours doing exactly what 12-year-old boys do. We read comics by flashlight. We ate Doritos until our fingers were orange. We told ghost stories that weren't actually scary. By midnight, we were exhausted. The sugar crash hit us hard. "Lights out?" Sam asked, yawning. "Lights out," I said. We turned off the lantern. The tent plunged into darkness. Outside, the crickets were chirping. The wind was rustling the leaves of the big oak tree above us. It was peaceful. I closed my eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of my own backyard. I felt safe. I was 20 feet from my house. My parents were just upstairs. Nothing could touch me here. I drifted off. I don't know what time I woke up, but I know what woke me up. It wasn't a sound. It was a smell. I opened my eyes in the pitch black of the tent. I took a breath. The air didn't smell like grass or campfire smoke anymore. It smelled heavy. It tasted metallic, like I was sucking on a dirty penny. And underneath that copper tang, there was something else, something wet and stagnant. It smelled like pond water, like algae and rotting fish baking in the sun. I wrinkled my nose. There wasn't a pond for miles. "Sam," I whispered. "I smell it too," Sam whispered back. His voice was trembling. He was awake. We lay there in the dark, frozen. The smell was getting stronger. It was seeping through the mesh of the tent windows. It was suffocating. Then the cricket stopped. It wasn't a gradual fade. It was instant. 1 second, the backyard was full of noise. The next, it was dead silent. The wind died. The leaves stopped rustling. The silence was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. And then, from the tree line behind the fence, we heard it. A whistle. It wasn't a bird, it was melodic. A simple 3-note tune. Low, high, low. It sounded cheerful. It sounded human. "Is that your dad?" Sam hissed. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. "My dad doesn't whistle, and he's asleep." We waited. The whistle came again. Closer this time. It wasn't behind the fence anymore. It was inside the yard. Low, high, low. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I wanted to unzip the tent and run. But my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed. The freeze instinct had taken over. Then the voice started. It came from the direction of the house. "Leo." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was my mom. It had to be. "Leo." "Sam." The voice drifted through the tent walls. "Come inside, boys. I made cookies." Sam sat up. "It's your mom," he whispered, sounding relieved. "She wants us to come in." He reached for the zipper of the tent door. "Stop," I said. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was tight. "What?" Sam asked. "It's just your mom." "Listen to it," I whispered. "Really listen." The voice came again. "Leo, come inside." My blood turned to ice. The cadence was wrong. It was too flat. There was no inflection. It sounded like someone had recorded my mom's voice and was playing it back on a broken radio. The words were chopped up. "Leo, come inside." And there was something else. A wet clicking sound between the words, like the speaker had too much saliva in their mouth. "That's not her," I said. Tears pricked my eyes. "That's not my mom." I crawled over to the mesh window that faced the house. I needed to see. I peeked through the screen. The kitchen light was off. The whole house was dark. My parents' bedroom window was dark. If my mom was outside calling us, why were all the lights off? "Leo," the voice was closer now. It wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from the middle of the lawn, right between us and the safety of the sliding door. "Shine the light," I told Sam. My voice was barely a squeak. "What?" "Shine the flashlight," I commanded. "I need to see who it is." Sam fumbled in the dark. I heard the click of the plastic button. The beam of light cut through the darkness of the tent. It hit the mesh window. It illuminated the patch of grass outside. It swept left, empty yard. It swept right. The swing set. Then Sam aimed it straight ahead, toward the house. The beam landed on a figure standing in the middle of the lawn. It was my mom. Or it looked like her. From a distance, it was wearing her favorite blue floral nightgown. It had her shoulder-length blonde hair. But as the light held steady, my brain started to reject what I was seeing. The figure was too tall. Way too tall. My mom was 5 feet 4 inches. This thing stood at least 7 feet. Its arms hung down past its knees. Sam's hand was shaking, making the light dance, but I saw the face. It was smiling. A wide, frozen grin that stretched too far across the face. It showed too many teeth. And the eyes. They weren't eyes. They were just painted on. Like a doll. Flat white circles with black dots in the middle. They didn't blink. They didn't react to the light. "Leo," the thing said. Its jaw didn't move. The sound just emanated from it. "Cookies." Then I looked at the nightgown. It wasn't fluttering in the breeze. It wasn't hanging loosely. The fabric of the nightgown was merged with its skin. The blue floral pattern wasn't cloth. It was part of its flesh. It looked like melted wax that had been painted to look like clothes. Where the sleeve met the arm, there was no cuff. Just a smooth transition from blue flowers to pale gray skin. It was a mimic. A thing trying to look like a mother, but getting the details all wrong. Sam whimpered. He dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor of the tent, casting wild shadows. The thing on the lawn stopped talking. It dropped. It didn't fall over, it folded. Its knees bent backward like a grasshopper. It dropped onto all fours. And then it started to move. It didn't run. Slap, slap, slap. It loped across the grass, wet, heavy palms hitting the earth. It was moving fast, incredibly fast, and it was coming straight for the tent. Slap, slap, slap. The sound was getting closer. It was the sound of wet meat hitting the ground at full speed. I was frozen. My brain had shut down. I was staring at the wall of the tent, watching the shadow of the thing grow larger and larger as it charged through the flashlight beam. Wham! The entire side of the tent bowed inward. It didn't tear. The nylon stretched tight like a drum skin. Something heavy was pressing against the outside. I could see the outline of a hand pushing into the fabric, but it wasn't a hand. The fingers were too long. They had too many joints. They pressed into the nylon until the fabric turned white from the tension. Then came the smell. It flooded the tent instantly. that stench of stagnant pond water and wet copper. It was so strong I gagged. My eyes watered. A voice came from right outside the mesh window, inches from my ear. "Leo, open up." It wasn't using the mimicking voice anymore. It wasn't trying to sound like my mom. The voice was a wet, guttural click. It sounded like insects chittering inside a human throat. "Open up." A fingernail slowly dragged down the mesh screen. Zip. That sound broke my paralysis. "Run!" Sam screamed. He didn't fumble. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the main zipper of the tent door and ripped it downward. The sound was loud in the silence. The tent flaps fell open. We didn't look back. We didn't look to the side to see the thing crouched in the grass. We bolted. We exploded out of the tent, scrambling over our sleeping bags, kicking off our shoes. We hit the wet grass in our socks. The sliding glass door was 20 feet away. 20 feet. That's nothing. That's 3 seconds of running. But that night it felt like 20 miles. The air was cold. The grass was slick with dew. My socks slipped on the mud. I stumbled, my hand hitting the ground. I heard the sound behind me. Thump. Slap. It wasn't running on 2 legs. It was thrashing against the earth, limbs flailing, wet hands slapping the mud. It was closing the distance. I scrambled up, gasping for air. I could hear Sam ahead of me, panting. "Mom! Dad!" Sam screamed. He reached the patio. He hit the concrete slab hard. He grabbed the handle of the sliding glass door and pulled. Thunk. It didn't move. My heart stopped. "It's locked!" Sam shrieked. He yanked it again. "Leo, it's locked!" My mom had said she left it unlocked, but habits are hard to break. Before they went to bed, one of them must have flipped the latch out of muscle memory. We were trapped. I hit the patio. I spun around, putting my back to the glass. The creature was at the edge of the lantern light. It had stopped moving. It was slowly unfolding itself, standing up on its hind legs. It rose up, and up, and up. It towered over us. 7 feet of pale gray skin, painted with a blue floral pattern. The face was blank. The painted-on eyes stared at me. The wide, toothy grin didn't move. It took a step onto the patio. I saw its feet. They weren't feet. They were hands, long, grasping fingers where toes should be. It reached out a hand toward me. "Leo!" It clicked. "Tasty!" I screamed. I hammered my fist against the glass behind me. "Dad! Dad!" The light in the kitchen flipped on. My dad appeared at the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, looking annoyed. He reached for the lock. Click. The door slid open. Sam and I tumbled backward into the kitchen, crashing onto the linoleum floor. "What is going on?" my dad started to say. Then he looked up. He saw the thing standing on the patio, inches from the threshold. He didn't scream. He didn't slam the door. He froze. I watched his face go slack. His eyes went wide. He was staring at the monster wearing his wife's face, wearing her skin like a costume. His brain couldn't process it. He stood there, paralyzed, mouth open, staring into the dead, painted eyes of the mimic. The creature hissed. It lunged for the open door. "Dad!" I screamed. I grabbed his pajama pants and yanked him backward with everything I had. He stumbled back, snapping out of the trance just as a gray hand swiped the air where his throat had been. He kicked the door shut. He threw the latch. Slam. A split second later, the creature slammed against the glass. It pressed its face against the door. The glass bowed under the pressure. It opened its mouth, its jaw unhinging like a snake, and let out a sound that shattered the windows in the living room. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of my own voice, amplified and distorted. "Dad! Dad! Dad!" Then it turned and skittered back into the darkness of the yard. The police arrived in 6 minutes. They searched the yard. They searched the woods behind the fence. They brought dogs. They found nothing. The police report said it was likely a drug-addicted drifter or a prank gone wrong. They tried to rationalize it. They talked about methamphetamines and hallucinations, but they couldn't explain the evidence. They found the tent. It wasn't cut with a knife. It had been torn open from the top, shredded like wet tissue paper. And then one of the officers looked up. Above the tent, high in the branches of the big oak tree, they found something. It was a nest. It was wedged in the fork of two large branches, about 15 feet off the ground. It was woven together from twigs, mud, and cloth. My dad climbed the ladder to look at it. He came down pale as a sheet. He threw up in the bushes. The nest was lined with clothes. My clothes. T-shirts that had gone missing from the laundry line. Old socks. A pair of jeans I thought I had lost. The thing hadn't just found us that night. It had been living in the tree above our tent for weeks. It had been watching me play in the yard. It had been watching my mom hang laundry. It had been studying us, learning our voices, learning our routine. And it was building something. But the worst part, the part that I can't escape, was the recorder. We had left the voice-activated recorder running in the tent. The police recovered it from the wreckage. They played it for my dad. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I was listening from the hallway. The first 30 minutes are normal. Just two boys laughing and falling asleep. Then there is an hour of silence, just the wind in the trees. And then, at 2:14 a.m., the recorder clicks on. There is a sound of something heavy landing on the ground next to the tent. Thump. Then the zipper slowly slides down. There is a wet breathing sound, and then a voice. It isn't the mimicking voice. It's a whisper, but it's too close. The audio clips because the source is pressing directly against the microphone inside the tent. Fit him, the voice clicks. Skin fits him. Then silence for 45 minutes. It was in the tent with us. Before we woke up to the smell, before the whistling, before the chase. It had already been inside. It had unzipped the door while we were sleeping. It had crawled in. It had sat over me, measuring me, touching the microphone, seeing if I was ready to be harvested. I don't go camping anymore. I don't go into backyards at night. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my room, I check my own skin in the mirror. I check my elbows. I check my neck. I just need to make sure my clothes aren't starting to merge. I need to make sure I'm still me.
Story 1. The Porcelain Jail. The manual didn't call it a toy. It called it a vessel. And it gave one specific warning. Do not damage the porcelain. But I didn't listen. And now, I was going to pay. I wrapped the silver duct tape around the doll's legs, binding them tight to the kitchen chair. I used the whole roll. I wasn't crazy. I was desperate. I just needed to keep that thing immobile until the sun came up. I turned my back for 1 second to grab the lighter fluid. Pop. It sounded like a wet balloon bursting behind my ear. I spun around. The chair was empty. The tape hadn't been peeled off. It had been shredded from the inside. The kitchen was dead silent. Then I saw it. It was sitting on the counter next to the knife block. When I bought it, it had a painted rosy smile. That smile was gone. Its mouth was now unhinged, hanging open in a silent porcelain scream. I didn't think, I just wanted it dead. I grabbed the heavy metal meat tenderizer from the drawer. I raised it high and brought it down with all my strength on the doll's left hand. Crack. I didn't hear porcelain shatter. I heard wet bones snap. I fell to my knees, blinding white pain exploding in my arm. The doll sat there untouched, not a scratch on it. But when I looked at my own left hand, my fingers were twisted backward, purple bruises were already blooming on my skin. My knuckles were powder. I gasped for air, staring at the thing. It slowly turned its head to look at me. Whatever I did to it, I did to myself. Creak. The sound came from the ceiling. Directly above me, Lily's room. I ignored the agony in my shattered hand. I scrambled up and ran for the stairs. My heart wasn't beating. It was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I kicked her door open. Get away from her. The doll was already there, hovering over my sleeping daughter. But it wasn't small anymore. It had swollen. The red felt suit was splitting at the seams, revealing slick, black, oily skin underneath. It raised a porcelain hand toward Lily's throat. I couldn't hit it. I couldn't cut it. If I hurt it, I hurt me. But I had to move it. I lunged. I tackled the thing, wrapping my arms around its hard, cold body. We crashed into the hallway and tumbled down the stairs. Thud, crack, thud. Every time it hit a step, I felt a new rib break in my own chest. It was like tackling a bag of cement. By the time we hit the bottom floor, I could barely breathe. We landed in front of the roaring fireplace. I couldn't let it go back up there. I had to end this. I rolled us both into the fire. The flames roared up, swallowing us. I waited for the smell of melting plastic. I waited for the doll to scream. Instead, I smelled my own hair singing. The fire didn't touch the doll. It moved through the doll and latched onto me. My skin blistered, my clothes caught. I tried to crawl out, but my legs wouldn't work. The damage was reflecting instantly. I looked through the wall of orange flame. I saw Lily standing at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. I tried to scream, "Run!" but smoke filled my lungs. I collapsed into the ash. The fire died down instantly. I couldn't move. I was just a charred husk on the hearth. But through my burned eyelids, I saw the doll. It was sitting in the middle of the ashes, completely pristine. Its red suit was perfect. Its porcelain face was smooth and cool. It stood up. It brushed a speck of gray ash off its shoulder. It didn't look at me, it looked up at my daughter. It held out a hand. And Lily, she began to walk down the stairs to take it. Story 2, the midnight shift. The timestamp on the monitor read 3 a.m. The mall had been locked down for 4 hours. The alarms were set. So there was no logical reason for a child to be sitting on Santa's lap in the dead center of the atrium. I leaned closer to the grainy black and white screen. The Santa was a mannequin, plastic, stiff, frozen in a jolly wave. But the child was moving. Its shoulders were heaving up and down. It was sobbing. I grabbed my flashlight and the radio. I didn't want to go down there. The air in a dead mall feels heavy, like it's holding its breath. I took the service elevator. The only sound was the squeak of my rubber soles on the polished tile. I walked toward the Christmas village. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like floor wax anymore. It smelled copper, like a butcher shop that had lost power. I passed the row of animatronic reindeer. They were supposed to be unplugged. Click. Whir. I froze. The reindeer on the left turned its mechanical head. Its glass eye caught my flashlight beam. Then the next one turned. And the next. They weren't looking at me. They were looking toward the throne. They were an audience. I swallowed the fear and stepped over the velvet rope. "Hey," I called out. "Kid, we're closed." The child didn't answer. It just kept burying its face in Santa's chest. I got close to the Santa mannequin. Up close, the texture was wrong. It wasn't smooth fiberglass. It was pockmarked, leathery. I reached out and touched Santa's hand. It was cold, it was soft, and it was damp. I recoiled, wiping the grease on my pants. This wasn't a display, it was skin. Dead, cured skin. I turned to the child. "Hey, look at me." I grabbed the kid's shoulder to pull him away from that thing. My hand hit hard wood. The child didn't stand up. Its head spun around 180 degrees on a rusty swivel. It wasn't a child. It was a ventriloquist dummy. Its jaw hung loose on rubber bands. But the face wasn't painted wood. It was my face. It had my eyes, my nose, the exact scar on my chin. The dummy's wooden jaw clacked open. It spoke with my voice. "Shift change," it whispered. The mall lights died instantly. The only light came from the red emergency signs, bathing the atrium in blood-red warnings. Behind the dummy, the meat Santa stood up. Bones crunched as it stretched. I didn't wait to see what it was. I sprinted. I scrambled up the dead escalator, my lungs burning. I could hear the slap, slap, slap of wet feet hitting the tile behind me. I burst into the security office, slammed the steel door, and threw the deadbolt. I collapsed into my chair. Hyperventilating, I was safe. Nothing could get through that steel door. I looked up at the wall of monitors to track them. Screen 1, atrium, empty. Screen 2, escalator, empty. Screen 3, hallway, empty. I frowned. Where did they go? Then I looked at screen 4. Screen 4 showed the inside of the security office. It showed me sitting in the chair. But on the screen, I wasn't hyperventilating. I was sitting perfectly still. My head was tilted to the side. And standing directly behind my chair was the dummy. It was holding a knife. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. I said, my own voice whispered right into my ear, "Shift. Change." Story 3. The carolers human beings need to breathe. That is a biological fact. But the things standing on my front lawn, they haven't taken a breath in 6 hours. They had been singing Silent Night on a loop since midnight. Perfect 4-part harmony, no pauses, no water breaks. I stood by the front door, hands over my ears. The sound wasn't just loud, it was drilling into the drywall. I looked through the peephole. 4 of them. Tall top hats, thick red scarves wrapped up to their noses. They stood ankle-deep in the snow, perfectly still. "Please!" I screamed through the wood. "Just go away, I don't have any money!" The singing stopped instantly. The silence was worse. It was heavy. It pressed against the house like water. Through the peephole, I saw the tallest one move. He slowly raised a gloved hand to his neck. He grabbed the edge of his red wool scarf. He pulled it down. I stumbled back. There was no mouth. There was no jaw. Growing out of the center of his throat was a wide, hollow cone made of pale, wet bone. It looked like the bell of a trumpet, but it was fused to his flesh. The bone trumpet quivered. The sound hit the house like a physical wall. Crash. The living room window exploded inward. Glass dust coated the carpet. I fell to the floor, clutching my head. My nose started to bleed. The sound wasn't music anymore. It was a frequency. It was vibrating my teeth inside my gums. And the lyrics had changed. They weren't singing about holy infants. The voices were booming, layered, and distorted. "Open the door," they harmonized. It was a cheerful melody. "We want to see your insides." "Stop it," I shrieked. The front door didn't break down. It disintegrated. The wood turned to sawdust under the pressure of the sound waves. The freezing fog rolled into my hallway, and then they drifted inside. They didn't walk. Their feet didn't lift off the floorboards. They just glided forward, hovering an inch above the ground. The 4 of them circled me. The bone trumpets on their necks pulsed with every note. The sound was so loud now that my vision was going white. I felt a pop in my own jaw. It wasn't breaking, it was stretching. I felt my lower jaw unhinge. I felt the bones in my throat shifting, fusing, widening into a circle. One of them reached out a hand. It was an invitation. I tried to scream. I tried to beg. But the sound that came out of my throat wasn't a scream. It was a perfect high C note. The fog on the street was thick the next morning. The house was empty. The front door was wide open, swinging gently in the wind. Down the street, 5 figures walked into the mist. They walked in perfect unison. The 5th one was wearing my pajamas. A thick red scarf was wrapped tight around its neck, hiding the lower half of its face. It stopped at a neighbor's house. It turned to face the door. It tilted its head to the left, and we began to sing. Story 4, The Trade. The police said my little brother got lost in the woods on Christmas Eve. They said he ran away. They were wrong. I didn't lose him. I sold him. It was 1998. I was 10, I was a brat, and I wanted a PlayStation more than I wanted a sibling. I found the mailbox deep in the woods. It was painted matte black, nailed to a dead oak. No flag, no numbers, just a symbol painted in red, an inverted candy cane, a hook. I wrote the note. Take Toby, he is defective. I want the console. That night, the air in the house turned freezing. I crept downstairs. The light wasn't coming from the tree, it was coming from the fireplace. The flames weren't orange, they were a sick, chemical green. A figure stood there, impossibly tall, wrapped in bandages made of dirty, soot-covered ribbon. He didn't have a face, just 2 hollow pits filled with ash. The collector didn't look at me. He leaned over the playpen where Toby was sleeping. He reached down with a hand made of charred wood. He picked Toby up like a rag doll. Toby didn't cry. He just looked at the monster and smiled. The collector dropped my brother into a burlap sack that dripped black sludge. He cinched it tight. Then he placed a gray box under the tree. He nodded once. A business transaction? Then he stepped into the green fire and vanished. I got exactly what I wanted. I opened the box. I plugged in the PlayStation. But the logo didn't appear. The screen exploded into static. Through the white noise, a face formed in the pixels. It was Toby's face, stretched and distorted, screaming in silent digital agony. I buried the console in the yard. That was 30 years ago. I've lived alone ever since, punishing myself. Tonight, on Christmas Eve, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. My blood turned to ice. Standing on my porch was a little boy in blue pajamas, holding a teddy bear. It was Toby. He hadn't aged a day. He looked exactly like he did in 1998. Toby? I fell to my knees, sobbing. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to take it back. Toby didn't smile. He looked up. His eyes were gone. In their place were 2 black, infinite voids. You don't understand, Leo, he said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. I didn't escape. I made a trade. He held up a piece of yellowed paper. I wrote a letter too, Toby said, inside the bag. I told him I wanted my childhood back, and I offered him a replacement. I heard the rustle of dirty ribbon behind me. I spun around. The collector was standing in my hallway. The sack was open. It was a gaping black maw, waiting. No, I screamed. I'm the big brother. You can't. The collector's charred hand grabbed my neck. The skin burned like dry ice. He dragged me backward. I clawed at the floor, but he was too strong. He threw me into the darkness of the bag. The last thing I saw was Toby. He walked into my house, He shut the door, he picked up the remote control and sat in my chair. "Be careful what you wish for, Leo," he said as the drawstring pulled tight. I fell into the dark, and then I saw them. Thousands of other eyes shining in the blackness of the sack. All the other traded children, and they were all hungry.
Story 1. The Chimney Sweep. The man who crawled out of our chimney on Christmas Eve wasn't Santa. And when he smiled at me with those yellow teeth and whispered, "Daddy's home," I realized he'd been living above my bedroom for 2 weeks. It started with the smell. For days, the living room reeked of something sour, like wet dog and rotting meat mixed with old soot. Mom blamed it on a dead rat in the walls. She scrubbed the carpets and lit scented candles, but the stench just got heavier. It hung in the air, thick and greasy, making it hard to breathe. Then the food started disappearing. I'd wake up and find the fridge slightly ajar, leftovers gone. Mom yelled at me for stealing the turkey cold cuts, even though I swore I hadn't touched them. Dad's empty chair at the dinner table already made the house feel hollow, but now the house felt watched. On Christmas Eve, the heating died. The house plunged into a deep freeze. Mom tried to light a fire, but the smoke wouldn't go up. It just billowed back into the room, choking us. "Something's blocking the flue," she coughed, grabbing a flashlight. She knelt down and shone the beam up into the black throat of the chimney. She went perfectly still. "Mom," I whispered. She didn't answer. She slowly backed away, her face gray. She didn't say, "It's the wind." She didn't say, "It's a loose brick." She turned to me, eyes wide and terrified, and whispered, "Get the car keys." Quietly. Crunch. A sound like a dry branch snapping echoed from the fireplace. A cloud of black soot exploded into the room. I saw a boot, then a leg, then a long, skeletal body slithering down the narrow shaft like a human centipede. He hit the hearth with a wet thud. When he stood up, my heart stopped. He was covered in black ash, but I could see what he was wearing. He had on my dead father's old flannel shirt, the one we had packed in a box in the attic months ago. It was torn at the elbows and stained with grime. He cracked his neck, the sound loud in the silent room. His skin was pale and flaky under the soot. He looked at Mom, then he looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. "You let the fire go out," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel grinding on glass. It got cold up there. Mom grabbed a heavy iron poker. "Get out," she screamed, her voice cracking. The man didn't flinch. He just smiled, revealing gums that were black with rot. He took a step toward me, arms wide open. "Come here, son," he wheezed. "Daddy's home." I screamed. Mom swung the poker, smashing it into his shoulder. He howled, not in pain, but in rage. He backhanded her, sending her flying into the wall. "Run, Leo," she choked out. I didn't think. I bolted for the kitchen door. I could hear his heavy boots stomping on the hardwood floor behind me. I could hear his wet, rattling breath getting closer. I fumbled with the back door lock, tears blinding me. Click. I threw the door open and scrambled into the snow. I didn't stop running until I reached the neighbor's porch lights a quarter mile down the road. The police found Mom unconscious, but alive. The man was gone, but when they inspected the chimney, the officers threw up. Above the damper, they found a nest. He had made a bed out of insulation and my dad's old clothes. There were chicken bones, candy wrappers, and a bucket he used for a toilet. And right above the mantel, he had drilled a small hole through the brick. He hadn't just been living there. He had been watching us. He watched us eat. He watched us watch TV. He watched us sleep. They never caught him. That was 20 years ago. I'm a grown man now. I just bought my first house with my wife. It's a new build, secure, with an alarm system. But tonight is Christmas Eve, and 10 minutes ago, while my wife was sleeping, I heard a sound coming from the heating vent above my bed. It wasn't the wind. It was a soft, wet cough, and the faint smell of rotting meat and peppermint. He followed me. Story 2, the 12th door. The police report says my parents died from a carbon monoxide leak. It says I survived by hiding in the bathroom with the window open. That is a lie. My parents didn't die. They were harvested. It began when I found the calendar in the attic crawl space. It wasn't cardboard. It was carved from heavy, blackened oak that smelled like old cedar and dried blood. It was a perfect replica of our house, down to the chipped paint on the porch. There were 12 doors. I opened door number 1 on a Tuesday. Inside the tiny compartment, there wasn't a chocolate. There was a fingernail, torn right from the root, bloody and raw. Scream. The sound ripped through the floorboards from the kitchen. I ran downstairs. My mom was clutching her hand over the sink, blood pouring down the drain. "It just popped off," she sobbed, staring at her thumb. I was cutting carrots and my nail just ripped itself out. I should have burned the calendar then, but I didn't connect the dots. Not until door number 5. Inside the compartment was a clump of gray hair. That night at dinner, Dad reached up to scratch his head, and a fistful of hair came away in his hand. Then another. Then another. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic, tufts of scalp visible. "What is happening to us?" he whispered. I ran to my room and grabbed the calendar. It felt warm, pulsing. I tried to throw it out the window. It hit the glass and bounced back. The window wouldn't open. I tried the door. Locked. I grabbed a hammer and smashed the calendar. I hit it until the wood splintered and cracked. I went to sleep shaking. When I woke up, the calendar was sitting on my chest. Whole. Unbroken. And the house had changed. The windows were gone. The walls were smooth plaster where the glass used to be. The front door was sealed shut, the wood fused to the frame. We were sealed in. "Leo!" Mom screamed from the hallway. I opened my door. My parents were standing at the top of the stairs. But they looked wrong. Their skin had a glossy, varnished sheen. When Mom tried to walk, her knee made a loud creak, like a stiff hinge. I can't bend my legs," Dad grunted, his face frozen in a rictus of terror. His jaw didn't move when he spoke. The sound just vibrated from his throat. I looked at the calendar in my hands. It was Christmas Eve. The 12th door was shaking. Something inside the box was pounding to get out. Thump, thump, thump. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't stop my hand. It was like invisible strings were pulling my fingers. I watched myself unlatch the tiny hook. The door swung open. Inside, there was no prize. There was a mirror, but it wasn't reflecting me. It was reflecting the hallway. I saw myself holding the calendar. I saw my parents standing behind me. But in the mirror, my parents weren't moving. They were statues. Wooden dolls carved with horrified expressions. I turned around. Mom and Dad were gone. Standing in their place were 2 life-sized wooden carvings. Their eyes were painted on. Their mouths were chiseled open in a silent scream. The smell of fresh sawdust filled the air. Then, the calendar started to laugh. A low, dry, wooden grinding sound. I looked back at the mirror inside the 12th door. The reflection of me was smiling. The reflection reached out of the tiny box. A hand, small at first, then expanding rapidly, shot out of the calendar. It wasn't a hand. It was a claw made of polished mahogany. It grabbed me by the throat. Splinters dug into my neck. "Trade," the voice whispered. It yanked me forward. The world spun. I felt my bones crunching, compressing, shrinking. I was being sucked into the box. The last thing I saw was the giant, wooden face of the reflection looking down at me from the bedroom. It picked up the calendar. It smiled with my mouth. "Merry Christmas," it said. Then it slammed the 12th door shut. I am still here. It's dark inside the box. I can hear the muffled sounds of the outside world. I can hear the thing wearing my skin walking around, talking to the neighbors, going to school. But yesterday, I heard a noise. The thing is back in the attic. I felt the calendar being lifted. I think he's going to give me to someone else for next Christmas. If you find a wooden house in your attic, don't open the door.
Story 3. Santa for Hire. The Santa Claus my father hired didn't smell like peppermint or pine needles. He smelled like formaldehyde and damp basement dirt. And when I sat on his lap for the photo, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. He didn't have fingernails, just raw, red skin where the nails should have been. "Smile, Sarah," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "Show me the gap in your teeth. The one you got when you fell off your bike last Tuesday." I froze. I hadn't told anyone I fell. I'd hidden the bruise and the chipped tooth from my parents because I wasn't supposed to be riding near the quarry. I pulled away, heart hammering. "Dad," I hissed, "I don't like him." Dad laughed, swirling his scotch. "Relax, kiddo. This guy is a pro. Cost me $2,000 for the night. North Pole Elite Services, best in the state." Dad was wrong. He didn't pay for a service.
He paid for an executioner. By midnight, the party was dead. The caterers were gone. The guests had driven home. It was just us, the empty champagne bottles, and Santa. He was sitting in Dad's leather recliner by the fireplace, staring blankly at the dying embers. He hadn't blinked in 4 minutes. "All right, buddy," Dad said, clapping his hands. "Show's over. Here's your check." Santa didn't move. He didn't take the check. "I can't leave," he said. His voice was deep, but it sounded wet, like his throat was full of fluid. "The reindeer aren't here yet." "Okay, weirdo," Dad sighed, stepping closer. "Get out of my house before I—" Santa stood up. The movement was wrong. Too fast, too jerky. He towered over my father. He reached out with those raw, nail-less fingers and grabbed Dad's throat. Crunch! It wasn't a snap. It was the sound of wet cartilage collapsing. Dad dropped to the floor, gasping for air, clutching his crushed windpipe. Mom screamed, but Santa was already moving. He produced a roll of silver duct tape from his velvet sack. He didn't hit us. He didn't yell. He just hummed Silent Night while he taped my parents to the dining room chairs. He taped their mouths shut. He taped their eyes open. "We need to be ready for the elves," he sang, smoothing the tape over Mom's hair. I was hiding under the kitchen island, shivering so hard my teeth rattled. I watched his heavy black boots clump across the hardwood. Thud, thud, thud. He stopped at the fridge. He opened it and took out a gallon of milk. Then he walked back to my parents. "Santa needs his cookies," he whispered. He forced the milk down my dad's throat, even though Dad couldn't breathe. Then he took a handful of raw cookie dough and shoved it into Mom's taped mouth. Then the boots turned. They pointed toward the island. "Sarah," he cooed. "Come out, little elf. I have a present for you." He reached under the counter. His face came into the light. Up close, I saw the truth. His beard wasn't fake. But it wasn't his. It was clumps of human hair, different colors, blonde, black, gray, glued to his chin with dried blood. And his skin, it looked like wax. I screamed and stabbed him in the hand with a steak knife I'd grabbed from the counter. The blade went right through his palm. He didn't bleed. He didn't flinch. He just looked at the knife handle sticking out of his hand and frowned. That wasn't on the list. Blue lights flashed through the front window. Sirens wailed. A neighbor had heard the screaming. Santa sighed. "The elves are here." He walked to the back door, unlocked it, and stepped out into the snow just as the police kicked down the front door. They found footprints leading to the woods, but they stopped at the river edge. The dogs lost the scent. But that wasn't the twist. When the detectives ran the background check on North Pole Elite Services, it didn't exist. My dad hadn't hired him. Dad swore he got an email confirmation. The police checked Dad's computer. The email came from inside the house. It was sent from my laptop. And when they searched the house, they found how he got in. In the back of my closet, behind the winter coats, there was a panel cut into the drywall. It led to a crawl space between the walls. Inside the crawl space, they found a sleeping bag, a bucket of raw cookie dough, and a jar full of fingernails. He hadn't broken in that night. He'd been living in my wall for months, typing emails on my laptop while I slept, watching me fall off my bike at the quarry. The police say he's gone. But every year on Christmas Eve, I get an email from an unknown address. It has no text, just a photo of me, taken through my bedroom window, time-stamped 1 minute ago.
Story 1. The Red Frost. Santa didn't come down the chimney that year. He didn't wear a suit. When the thing outside tapped on my window, it didn't have skin. It was just wet, exposed muscle shivering in the cold. I was 9 years old. The blizzard had snapped the power lines at 6 o'clock. By midnight, the cabin was a tomb. The only light came from the moon reflecting off 4 feet of snow. Dad had passed out downstairs on the couch, exhausted. I was alone upstairs, wide awake, watching the frost crawl over the glass. That's when I saw it, standing at the edge of the woods, maybe 100 yards out. It was impossibly tall, like a stretched-out shadow. But it wasn't a shadow. It was bright, crimson wetness. It looked like a man who had been peeled alive. It stood perfectly still, watching the house. I rubbed my eyes, praying the cold was making me hallucinate. When I looked back, the tree line was empty. I let out a shaky breath. I looked down at the front porch directly below my window. My blood turned to ice. It was there. It hadn't walked across the snow. There were no footprints leading to the house. It had just arrived, right at our door. I heard the front doorknob rattle downstairs. It wasn't a frantic shake. It was slow, deliberate. Click, click. I backed away from the window, my bare feet freezing on the wood floor. I crept to the hallway, listening. Downstairs, I heard my dad stir on the couch. "Hello?" He called out, his voice thick with sleep. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a voice answered him from the other side of the door. But it wasn't a person. It sounded wet, slushy, like raw meat slapping together to mimic human speech. "Let me in." Dad walked toward the door. I wanted to scream at him to stop, but my throat was paralyzed. "I told you to leave," Dad grumbled, reaching for the lock. The sound that followed wasn't the door opening. It was the sound of the wood exploding. The crash shook the entire cabin. Dad screamed. It wasn't a brave scream. It was a choked, gurgling sound of absolute shock. Then came the tearing noise. Wet, heavy tearing, like a butcher pulling ribs apart. Then a heavy thud. And then, absolute silence. I scrambled back into my room and dove under the bed. I squeezed myself against the wall, surrounded by dust bunnies, shaking so hard I thought my bones would snap. I stared at the sliver of moonlight hitting the floorboards. 5 minutes passed. The house was dead quiet. The wind howled outside, but inside, nothing moved. Then I heard it. The stairs creaked. Something heavy was coming up. It didn't sound like boots. It sounded like wet sponges hitting the wood. Squish. Step. Squish. Step. It was taking its time. It knew I was there. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Slowly, the doorknob turned. The door drifted open. A long, jagged shadow fell across the floor right in front of my face. Then, 2 feet stepped into the room. They were bare, red, and glistening. They had 3 toes, long and crooked, digging into the carpet. I squeezed my eyes shut, begging God to make me invisible. The floorboards groaned as the thing leaned down. Suddenly, the mattress above me was ripped away. The bed frame was thrown across the room like it weighed nothing. I looked up. The thing towering over me didn't have a face. It just had a smooth, red skull and a mouth that split vertically down its neck, filled with needle-thin teeth. Its beard wasn't hair. It was dripping icicles of frozen blood. It leaned close to my face. Its breath smelled like old copper and rot. In its hand, it was clutching a pile of loose, empty skin. It was my father's face. It held the skin up to its own raw skull. Does this fit? Story 2. The offering. Most kids leave milk and cookies. We didn't. The thing that visited our house on Christmas Eve didn't like sweets. It wanted meat. Specifically, raw liver. The rule was simple. Place the offering on the fireplace mantle by 10 p.m. Lock your bedroom door. Do not come out until the sun hits the snow. I turned 14 that year. I decided I was too old for fairy tales. I thought my parents were superstitious idiots, so I decided to prove a point. I sat in my room, headphones on, playing video games, letting the clock tick past the deadline. I wanted to see the look on their faces in the morning when the liver was still in the fridge and we were all still alive. I paused my game to get a drink. I looked at the time. 11:15 p.m. The house was silent. Too silent. The air felt heavy, like the pressure dropped before a tornado. My stomach turned. Not because I was scared, but because the silence felt physical. It pressed against my eardrums. I walked into the hallway. The Christmas tree lights weren't twinkling. They were burning a steady, angry red. I ran down the stairs and burst into the kitchen. The smell hit me instantly. It didn't smell like pine or cinnamon. It smelled like sulfur and wet dog hair. I gagged, ripping the fridge open. The plate of liver was right where I left it. Cold, bloody, forgotten. I grabbed the plate and spun around to run to the living room. I stopped cold. He was already there. standing in the archway. He was wearing a Santa suit, but it was filthy. It was covered in grease stains and patches of black mold. The suit was 3 sizes too big, hanging off his frame like he was made of sticks. He wasn't fat. He was skeletal. He didn't move. He just stood there, breathing in a wheezing, rattling rhythm. He raised a hand. His fingers were long and gray, like dead twigs. He pointed a single finger toward the empty fireplace mantel. A sound rumbled in his throat. A low, animalistic growl that vibrated the floorboards. Late. Panic hijacked my brain. My hands slick with sweat. The plate slipped. The ceramic shattered against the linoleum. The raw liver slid across the floor, stopping inches from his boots. He twitched. Then he lunged. He didn't run like a human. He moved with jerky, unnatural speed, like a stop-motion puppet missing frames. I threw myself backward, scrambling into the laundry room. I slammed the door and slid the bolt lock shut just as a heavy body impacted the wood. The door frame cracked, but it held. I backed away, huddling against the dryer, shaking so hard my teeth clattered together. On the other side of the door, the banging stopped. Then came the sound. Chewing. Loud. Wet, slurping noises. He was eating the raw meat off the kitchen tiles. I could hear the gristle snapping between his teeth. Then, silence. I waited. 1 minute. 2. Then, a soft scratching on the wood. Honey? I froze. It was my mom's voice. Perfectly clear. Warm. Safe. It's okay, sweetie. He's gone. I heard the noise. You can open the door now. Relief washed over me so hard I almost cried. I stood up and reached for the lock. Mom, I'm so sorry I dropped the... I stopped. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. My eyes drifted down to the gap at the bottom of the door. A thick, dark liquid was seeping under the doorframe, pooling around my socks. It wasn't cold. It was steaming hot. My mom was asleep upstairs. She had taken a sleeping pill. She wouldn't have heard a nuclear bomb, let alone a plate breaking. Open up, the voice said. It didn't sound like my mom anymore. It sounded like a corrupted audio file, glitching and skipping. Open up, sweetie. The liquid touched my bare skin. It was blood. The knob didn't rattle. It didn't shake. It just slowly, quietly, began to turn. He wasn't mimicking my mother to trick me. He was mimicking her because he had just swallowed her voice box.
Story 3. The final shift. The mall closed 3 hours ago. The security guards had already done their rounds and left. The main lights were dead, leaving only the dim amber glow of the emergency exit signs. But the Santa in the center court never got up. I was working the closing shift at the pretzel kiosk. My manager had bailed early, leaving me to scrub the counters alone. I was sweeping up salt near the fountain when I finally walked over to the throne. He was just sitting there. His head was tilted down, his fake white beard covering his chest. "Hey," I called out. My voice echoed too loudly in the empty atrium. "Buddy, the mall's closed. You have to go." He didn't twitch. He didn't even breathe. I shook my head, annoyed. I turned my back to toss the trash bag into the bin. It took maybe 5 seconds. When I turned back around, my broom clattered to the floor. He was closer. He hadn't walked. He was still sitting on the throne, his posture identical. But the heavy velvet chair had slid 30 feet across the tile floor without making a sound. He was now right at the edge of the food court carpet. My stomach turned. The silence in the mall suddenly felt heavy, like the air was being sucked out of the room. I grabbed my bag and speed-walked toward the south exit near Macy's. I pushed the crash bar on the glass doors. It didn't budge. I looked down. There were no chains. There were no locks. The metal of the door was fused to the frame. It looked like the steel had melted and hardened again. Panic set in. I sprinted to the west exit. Fused. I ran to the loading dock hallway. The door was gone. Just a smooth wall of drywall where the exit used to be. I was trapped in the dark with him. I backed away from the wall, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Somewhere behind me, I heard it. Ching, ching, ching. Sleigh bells. Soft, rhythmic, and getting louder. I ducked into an open clothing store, scrambling behind a circular rack of winter coats. I pulled my knees to my chest, hiding in the fabric, watching the entrance through the display window. The bells stopped. I waited. The silence stretched until I thought I would scream. I slowly turned my head to look into the store mirror behind me. I froze. He was standing right behind the rack. He was enormous. Up close, he looked wrong. His face was plastic, a rigid, unmoving mask with painted rosy cheeks. But behind the cutout eye holes, real human eyes were frantically rolling around, wide with terror. I spun around to run, but he was too fast. He didn't grab me. He just reached out a stiff, gloved hand and touched my shoulder. His touch wasn't violent. It was cold. Spreading cold. The plastic jaw of the mask creaked open mechanically. A voice came out, but it wasn't a man's voice. It was synthesized, distorted, like a speaker blowing out. New, arrival, processed. I tried to scream, but my jaw wouldn't open. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't lift. I looked down at my hands. My skin was gone. In its place was smooth, hard fiberglass. My fingers were fused together in a permanent, polite wave. I wasn't dying. I was stiffening. The Santa picked me up effortlessly, like I was a doll. He carried me out of the store and toward the display window. He set me down next to the other mannequins. I couldn't blink. I could only stare forward. As he walked away to sit back on his throne, I looked at the mannequin next to me. It was wearing a summer dress. Its face was painted in a permanent smile. But inside the plastic eye sockets, I saw a real human pupil. It darted to the left, looking right at me. It was my manager. She hadn't bailed early. We are open tomorrow from 9 to 9. And I will be here. Smiling. Forever.
Story 1, The Tree Farm. People say my little brother got lost in the woods that night. They're liars. Lost implies an accident. I saw what dragged him into the trees, and I know exactly where the bodies are buried. It was December 23rd, Miller's Cut Your Own. We were miles past where the streetlights ended, deep in the sticks where the dark feels heavier. The guy at the gate didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just took my $20, pointed a dirty fingernail toward a dirt road disappearing into the pines, and tapped his watch. The sun was already dying behind the tree line. Leo ran ahead. You know, kids, he wanted the perfect tree. We walked deeper. The air didn't smell like Christmas. It smelled like pine needles and old copper. The deeper we went, the more the world felt muted. No road noise. No wind. Just the crunch of snow and my own breathing. Then, the buzzer sounded. It wasn't a normal tone. It was a harsh, metallic scream that cut off abruptly into static. I turned to call Leo back. Leo, let's go. No answer. I walked around a cluster of spruces. No footprints leading away. No sound. Just the endless, suffocating rows of trees. My blood turned to slush. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy. It was watching me. I pushed through a wall of branches into a dense clearing. I found his mitten. Just sitting there in the snow. But it was the tracks next to it that made my lungs seize. They weren't boot prints. They were wide. Bare feet. In 10-degree weather. Splayed toes, dragging something heavy through the ice. I looked up. 50 yards out. A figure. He was wearing a Santa suit, but it wasn't velvet. It was stiff, stained black with grease and fluids. It looked wet. Hey! I screamed. The figure stopped. He didn't turn his body. He just twisted his neck. He was wearing a plastic Santa mask, but it was on backward. I was staring at the painted, rosy smile of Saint Nick, but I could see the back of the man's bald head pulsing with veins. He didn't have a chainsaw. That would have been loud. That would have been a mercy. In his right hand, he held a pair of 2-foot-long, rusted pruning shears. He snapped them shut. He didn't run. He loped. Unnaturally fast, like a spider. I scrambled back, turning to run, but my foot caught a wire hidden in the snow. Sleigh bells. Dozens of them, nailed to the trees above me, erupted in noise. It was an alarm system. He was hurting me. I scrambled on all fours, fear creating tunnel vision. The world shrank to the size of a coffin. I saw a pile of bundled trees wrapped in netting, ready for transport. I dove behind them, burying myself in the needles. I held my breath until my chest burned. The footsteps stopped inches from my head, snip. Snap. The smell hit me first. Not pine. Rotting meat. I slowly turned my head to the bundle I was pressing against. Through the plastic netting, I saw denim. Then a small boot. I shifted my weight and looked at the bundle next to it. A blue eye stared back at me through the mesh. They weren't trees. They were bodies. Frozen, wrapped, and stacked for shipping. I was hiding in a graveyard. The Santa thing stepped around the pile. He raised the shears. I didn't think. I remembered the flare gun in my pocket, my dad's paranoia finally paying off. I pulled it. I didn't aim at him. I aimed at the trees above his head. They were dry as kindling. The canopy ignited instantly. A wall of orange heat roared to life. The man didn't scream like a person. He let out a high-pitched, animal whine and stumbled back, shielding his face. I ran. I floored it toward the truck. I wanted to hear tires screeching, but all I could hear was the phantom sound of those shears snapping shut. The police found the farm. They found the ashes. They found the bundles. 6 of them. But they never found the man. And they never found Leo. They found one thing near the back fence, untouched by the fire. Leo's other mitten. The officer gave it to me in an evidence bag. "We're sorry," he said. I took it home. It felt heavy. Too heavy. I turned the mitten inside out. A finger tumbled onto my table. It wasn't a child's finger. It was thick, calloused, with a dirty fingernail. And on it was a gold wedding band. I recognized the ring. It belonged to the guy who took my money at the gate. My brother isn't lost. He was just the start of the harvest. Story 2, The Last Delivery. I have removed the Scooby-Doo villain mask. I have cut the brave hero moment where you fight back with a log. You are now prey. The ending is no longer a riddle, it is a promise of violence. The tip was $40. The location was a dead zone. I should have known that a payout that high meant I wasn't the driver. I was the bait. It was Christmas Eve. My fuel light had been screaming for 20 minutes. The GPS led me off the main road, onto gravel, and finally into a tunnel of trees so thick they blocked out the moonlight. I pulled up to the house. It wasn't a haunted mansion. It wasn't a shack. It was a perfectly normal, beige suburban house, sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere. That was worse. It looked like it had been dropped there from the sky. I grabbed the package. It was light. Rattled when I shook it. Empty. I knocked. The door opened instantly. An old woman stood there. Tiny. Grandmotherly. Wearing a flower-covered apron. "Oh, you poor thing," she chirped. "Come in, get warm while I find my glasses." I stepped inside. The heat hit me like a physical wall. It was suffocating. 90 degrees, easy. And the smell. Cinnamon. Heavy, artificial cinnamon. But underneath it, wet dog. And something metallic. Like pennies. Just a moment, dear, she called from the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, sweat already prickling my neck. I looked at the fireplace. Stockings were hung up. Not 2 or 3. 12. They were identical red felt. And they all had the same name embroidered on them in gold thread. Guest. 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 My stomach turned over. This wasn't a home. It was a processing center. A baby monitor on the counter crackled to life. A voice came through. Deep. Wet. Guttural. Is he distinct? I froze. The voice spoke again. Does he have good skin? The old woman walked back in. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her face was slack. Up close, I saw it, her skin didn't sit right on her skull. It was loose around the jawline. He's perfect, sweetie, she whispered to the monitor. Thundering footsteps erupted from upstairs. Boom. 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 The ceiling plaster dusted down onto my shoulders. I didn't wait. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed the heavy coat rack and shoved it in front of the hallway arch. The woman screeched, a sound like a fox screaming. She lunged, swiping at me with a serrated bread knife. I dodged, crashing into the front door. Locked. I smashed the glass panel with my elbow, reached through, and tore the bolt back. Glass sliced my arm. I didn't feel it. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I tumbled out into the snow. Behind me, the door exploded outward. Splinters flew everywhere. He stepped onto the porch. 7 feet tall. Massive. He wasn't wearing a Santa mask. His face was wrapped in layers of brown packing tape and shipping labels. Dozens of stamps covered his eyes. He had no mouth. Just a slit cut into the tape that whistled when he breathed. He didn't roar. He just started sprinting. I threw myself into the car. Key in ignition. The engine sputtered. Come on. I screamed. A fist smashed the passenger window. Shattered glass sprayed the seat. A hand wrapped in tape grabbed my shoulder. Squeezing. Crushing. I slammed the car into reverse. Tires spun on the ice, whining, smoking, and then they caught. The car jerked back, ripping me from his grip. I spun the wheel and floored it. In the rearview mirror, he wasn't chasing me anymore. He was just standing there, watching me leave. The old woman stood next to him, waving. I drove for an hour before I pulled into a gas station. I was shaking. I checked my arms for cuts. Then I looked at the passenger seat. The empty box I had delivered was sitting there. I hadn't put it back in the car. He must have thrown it in when he grabbed me. My phone pinged. A notification from the delivery app. Delivery complete. Then a second ping. New pickup scheduled, current location. I looked in the mirror. On the back of my neck, right where the giant had grabbed me, was a small, blinking red light stuck to my skin. I clawed at it, but it wouldn't come off. The GPS on my dashboard rerouted itself. It didn't point home. It pointed back to the woods. And the doors locked themselves. Story 3, The Spare Room. My dad nailed the spare room shut to keep something inside. He said the floor was rotted out. He lied. He didn't use enough nails to stop the breathing. We moved in December 1st. The house was always freezing. My dad said the heater was broken, but I knew he just didn't want to pay the bill. He spent his nights drinking in the kitchen, yelling at the walls. I spent my nights staring at the spare room door at the end of the hall. A single 2x4 was nailed across the frame. But at 3 a.m., when the house was dead silent, I could hear wet, heavy footsteps pacing behind it. Dad lost his job 2 weeks prior. The tension in the house was a lit fuse. He started drinking at noon. By dinner, he was screaming. I ran upstairs to hide. I sat on my bed, knees to my chest, listening to the glass breaking downstairs. Around midnight, I crept into the hallway. The board on the spare room door had been pried loose on one side. The door was cracked open an inch. A hand slid out from the darkness. It wasn't a ghost. It was pale, skeletal, covered in soot, with fingernails curled like claws. I didn't scream. I was too scared of the man downstairs to be scared of the thing upstairs. The hand wasn't reaching to grab me. It was holding something. A candy cane. Broken in half. Dirty. A voice whispered from the crack. It sounded like dry leaves scraping together. Is he loud? I stared at the door. I nodded slowly. The voice whispered back. He hurts my ears, too. I took the candy cane. It was sticky. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I felt understood. Christmas morning. The violence started early. My mom dropped a coffee mug in the kitchen. Dad exploded. I ran to the landing. Dad had Mom cornered against the fridge. You stupid bitch, he roared. He raised his fist. His veins bulged like worms beneath his skin. I screamed. Daddy, stop. He spun around. His eyes were entirely black, dilated by pure hate. Shut your mouth or you're in. He didn't finish the sentence. The wall behind the refrigerator didn't just break, it burst outward. A figure launched itself into the room. It wasn't a hero. It was a creature. Gaunt, ribs showing through rags that used to be clothes, hair matted into dreadlocks. It moved on all fours like a primate. It didn't scream. It hissed. It tackled my dad to the floor. The sound of the impact wasn't like a movie. It was a wet thud. The creature straddled him. It raised a rusted hammer it had dragged out of the wall. Mom grabbed me and pulled me out the back door into the snow. We shivered there, listening. There were no screams. Just the sound of heavy, wet breathing. And the dragging of something heavy across the linoleum. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Guns drawn. They dragged the man out in handcuffs. He didn't struggle. He looked full. Sated. As they shoved him into the cruiser, he looked up and saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't say, "Merry Christmas." He just brought a dirty finger to his lips. Shoo. My dad survived, but he can't walk anymore. He can't talk, either. Brain damage. The police told us the man in the walls was a fugitive. A killer who had been squatting in the crawlspaces for 6 months. They called him a monster. But I kept the candy cane. Because I realized something later. The police said the crawlspace was full of rat bones. Thousands of them. He was starving. He didn't come out to save us. He came out because my dad broke the silence. He came out to protect his territory. Sometimes, the only thing that can stop a monster is a hungrier one.